We have everything in. Now it is time to do the testing portion of it to make sure that the radio works and the dash cam works and the backup camera works, steering wheel controls work, iPod works, the speakers are the correct polarity, the amplifier turns on, and all those other things. We have to go through and test all of those so that we can get to the actual tuning of the car. Fernando's already in the car. He's getting ready to go through the testing, so let's join him. The first step, of course, is to go in and shut off the demo. We know that the camera works. Next, we test to make sure that the reverse trigger for the camera works. And it does. Plug a phone in, and we can finish doing our testing because the next part is going to be audio. When CarPlay launches, this is a good time to test the steering wheel controls, push to talk feature. What's the weather like today?
Expect mostly clear skies starting in the morning.
Next, we'll test the polarity of the speakers to make sure they're all moving in the direction we like. To do that, we use our iPhone and we use a track from Sheffield Labs My Disc, and it's just the polarity pop. Turn your stereo up significantly, grab your polarity popper, be it the phone or what we like to use is the PT9A Plus. We're looking through consistency. Our first speaker is green, green, red. We want all our speakers to be that. Tweeters so far are good. 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 For the rear speakers, it's way easier to test from underneath the back deck here than trying to crawl up in there and get it just right. What we want to see back here is red, red, green because we're testing the back side of the speaker. And there we have it. Our speakers are all moving the direction we want. That is spectacular. The next thing seems kind of a silly test to do, but you have to do it. That is checking your balance and fader. All four corners of the car, making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. For that, we're just gonna play pink noise, which you can also use that same disc for, or what we like to use, which we're gonna just transition into anyways. The EduCar Test and Tune app has a mono pink noise, which is just this sound, but it'll allow us to easily test all the speakers. Go back into the radio's main menu, balance and fader, passenger, driver's front, driver rear, center. All our speakers are moving in the right order. That's really important. I can't stress that enough. Depending on the radio manufacturer, this next part, if you're using some form of a DSP, is, well, it's kind of important. You want to go in and make sure that the EQ settings, these here, as well as any time alignment, seat positioning, or other weird things that the radio might do to the audio, are all turned off. Don't leave them on. They can change the way it sounds, and when you're tuning it, you're gonna be tuning it for those settings, and if someone goes in and turns it off, it's gonna really queer the deal. Fortunately for us, Kenwood, they don't activate anything. This isn't our personal car, obviously. We need to get the seat lined up where it was when it came in, those measurements we took, and also close the sunroof because it wasn't open when it came here. The floor mats all back in, roll the windows up, get the car ready for the actual tuning part of this. But before we can start that, we need to set up the amplifier. If you've never used an AudioControl or any DSP product for that matter, go to their website, download the most latest version of the software. If you've been playing around with software on your computer and it's been a couple months, go over and make sure that the software you had is the most recent version. These guys change this stuff all the time, make small improvements on the units, and if you don't have it, it could be bad. Plug the unit in, and the first step I like to do is go in and set everything up. On an AudioControl, that involves setting up your labels. Now you can call these whatever you want. If you're running it as tweeter, you could label it tweeter. They conveniently already label it as front. This is not used. The other thing too is depending on the AudioControl amplifier you buy, the input gain needs to be adjusted. It may come all the way up, in which case turn it back down to 0 dB. And or if you want to have a little bit of room in the end, you can set it to -3. But keep in mind you have to set it to -3 on all channels. The reason why you may want to do something like that is if you want to keep gains as low as possible to keep as much noise out of the system as you can. If you leave it at 0 or plus, depending on where your gain structure is going to fall in, and you tune it and you get in and you're like, I wish it was louder, and you've already got it as loud as it can possibly be, you're going to be kind of disappointed. So think of this as just more of a mental thing. It's a tip from Mr. Jeff Smith and how he tunes cars. With the input view done, select output view. Now we can label these. Line out was a feature we were talking about when we had it on the bench, and we said we can assign that channel to anything we want. And how that's done is we'll come out here where it says output summing. Select 3 and 4. These numbers here across the top are representative of the input view. When you're on front, you're feeding it this front here. When you go to rear, you're feeding it this rear here. But if you'll notice, we can turn as many of these on as we want, depending on how you're hooking this amplifier up. For example, if we go back to that front and we were using the 7/8 high input, we may want to have both of these on here. If we go back into input view, we can control how much signal comes in over 7 and 8 here. This is how we'll do our mixing for that input. Back to line out, here we can choose what we want that to be. If we wanted it to be just front input, as if we were gonna run channel 1 and 2 to a set of tweeters, 3 and 4 to mid bass, 3 and 4 to rear, 5 obviously out to the subwoofer, and add that second amplifier to power up the mid bass, this is how we would do that. Dashboard view is an overall view of everything that you're adjusting with. I like to go to that in the end and just kind of check everything to make sure nothing has changed, but setting up the unit, I typically stay in the input output view. Memory, it has 4 memories. Typically we set up the 1 and we label it what the car is. After setting up all the titling and picking your output, select your first channel, in this case front, and set your crossover. Our default first setting on a system like this is going to be 80 Hertz. As we're tuning the system, we may want to turn that up or down. With that done, we move on to the delay. At the beginning of the video, you may remember Fernando wrote all this stuff down. We input that data now. On the audio control, you can just enter straight inches. You don't have to do any math or anything like that. The last step in the basic setup is the remote volume. We have the ACR3 volume knob that we want to use for the subwoofer. We're on the subwoofer page, select level control. This will tell the amplifier that that knob is just going to turn up and down this channel. File manager at the top, select the arrow, type in save as, select yes. I like to use the date, car, and general information and select save. The next thing you need to do, even though you've saved the file, is actually write it to the device. Over here where it says memory, hold to store, 2 fingers on the trackpad, press and hold the trackpad or your mouse. Make sure that it says no, do not overwrite, and yes, overwrite settings. If it says anything other than that, don't do it. Select yes. And this just wrote the software to the amplifier, so the basics of basics is now set up. If you scroll down here to the bottom, this is where you can get into the EQ portion of it. Going back to the front, if you'll notice, it just has 1 level control here. That is because right now it is just set up for front EQ, rear EQ, and subwoofer EQ. When you're on the EQ page, it has a 1, 1 minus 2, 1 dash 2, and 2. The default setting is 1 dash 2. It's not 1 minus, it's a dash. It's just separating the 2. Select 2, and you'll notice now you have 2 level controls with 2 mutes. This is how you split the EQ apart so that you can do a right EQ and a left EQ. You may choose not to do that. That's entirely up to you. For example, on the rears, typically it's a rear. I don't get too involved in it other than just to blend it in with the system, so I will leave it as just a rear EQ. Most EQ DSPs have some form of grouping to do that. One other tidbit to know is on the EQ where you see it says 10, 14, and 30. This allows you to, this is your first time doing this, maybe make the EQ a little bit easier to work with by having a 10 band, a 14 band, which adds more into the subwoofer, and 30 band. It is for all channels, so you can't split it apart. So if I'm here and I go here, it stays the same. Auto is if you're using a factory head unit, you can play pink noise from that same track we did, and it will auto EQ the system for you, and it'll give you the option select yes or select no, and that is just fixing the electrical side. If you've adjusted it and done a bunch of, and you're like, I don't like it, you can select flat and that will erase the EQ you've done. And if you select bypass, that'll allow you to turn on and off to A/B between what you've done and what it was when it started. F, M, and S stands for fast, medium, and slow. And then if you would like to store in EQ settings to copy and paste, you can do that under RTA memories. With that out of the way, we could start the tuning process. That's not going to be done here in the trunk. We'll be doing that outside of the car. Fernando's in the the car right now doing the final listen, just getting it all, yay! The tuning process and why Fernando's in there is I get it to where I think it's gonna be, I hop in and out a few times, and then, you know, my ears get kind of fatigued. I'm getting old. I let him hop in and he does some A/B stuff for me to make sure that everything that I picked was right. So it's kind of like if you've ever been to the eye doctors where it's like better, worse, better, worse. I just like to check, see that the corrections that I'm making actually are making a difference, because sometimes they don't. Sometimes it actually makes it sound worse. But now he's telling me we've got it, we've locked it down, so it's time to hop in for the final listen. Yeah, it's unfortunate that YouTube doesn't allow us to have a lot of fun and play a bunch of music so you guys can hear it. But I did promise you, here's some bump in the trunk.
Bump in the trunk.
Bump in the trunk. Let's head back there, check this out. Alright, we're done. I know, right? Thanks for going on this journey with us, guys. We hope you enjoyed this. We had a lot of fun playing with the new AC5 1300. Fernando, as we always say.
On to the next one, guys. I'm gonna keep playing this.
Okay, you can keep playing it. I'm gonna wipe off the windshield. My greasy head. You guys have a great night as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.